Hello guys, welcome here to another edition of Out of Turn 4. What a fun weekend on the Bristol Dirt. We got a little bit of news to get to. I also want to discuss our Twitter poll before we get going. So of course, last week we had quite an entertaining Texas race. And let's face, man, we had an entertaining race, and let's face it, it's going to force the hands of ISC, especially when NASCAR comes around in the playoffs, to determine what's going to happen to that track. So I asked the question, what do people think should become of Texas Motor Speedway after a surprisingly good weekend of racing on the current configuration between the Truck Series and the NTT IndyCar Series? Of course, my answers were keep doing what's working, reconfigure it, or bulldoze and take Indy to COTA. And surprisingly, of course, we only got 2 votes, but we do thank you for those who did vote on this. And I might try to do this every week as kind of just a question of the week, so we'll kick it off with that. And surprisingly, it was split with 2 votes. One person said keep doing what's working, and then the other one said bulldoze, take Indy to COTA. And I'm sorry, I still happen to agree with it. I still think COTA has the best racing in the state of Texas. I think, don't get me wrong, IndyCar nailed this downforce package. But the truck race, the finish was exciting. I can't say much else about it. The IndyCar race was light years better than last year's. And last year's finish was damn good. So, I do want to thank you all again for voting. But man, I'm shocked. Nobody said reconfigure or repave it. And that's, that says a lot. I think a lot of people agree with me. Or at least the people that voted agree with me that Texas is just not a good track. But anyway, let's get on with the show. Thanks again for voting. I might put out another poll, or I might already have another poll out right now. So keep your eyes peeled. Also, another thing, I'm going to kind of go through all the prospects. I'll explain in a few minutes, but we begin with the Truck Series on the Bristol Dirt. And Joey Logano, he dominated that truck race, man. I don't think he lost the lead once. He gets his second career Truck Series victory, his first since 2015 at Martinsville. And if you're wondering who he drove for then, he drove for Brad Keselowski Racing in the number 29 when Brad Keselowski owned his own truck team. Great run for Logano. Not much I can say about that race. I didn't watch too much of it, but it looked pretty thrilling. Christopher Bell, he holds off a late charge from Tyler Reddick to win at Bristol. We know that caution, man. NASCAR really showed their favoritism, I think, with the caution. And, they threw a caution for Kyle Busch. He spun. Basically, the infield wasn't even on the racing surface. They threw a yellow right away. Ryan Blaney, though, gets spun by Briscoe at the end, and NASCAR decides no yellow, even though he's spinning right in front of the pack. Oh, man, what favoritism does, man. Just favoritism at its finest, and I think it ruined a good race there. And then the late caution, which of course is on the final lap, so Christopher Bell ultimately ended up winning, holding off Tyler Reddick, his 5th career win. And don't get me wrong, Christopher Bell deserved to win, but I wish we could have had a chance to see Tyler Reddick at least make a run, try to make it a race. But unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be for him. But another big story in this race, and I think this one generated a lot of controversy. And this might lead into my question of the week. I haven't thought about it yet as we're recording, but again, it could already be out by the time we're premiering Kyle Larson and Ryan Preece, they tangled during the race. Of course, Kyle Larson did kind of the same thing he did to Chase Elliott last year and kind of just pinned someone to the outside wall. This time it was Ryan Preece. He pinned him to the outside wall, ultimately sent Ryan Preece backward. Then under caution, Ryan Preece caught up to Kyle Larson, gave him kind of a finger like you're going to get it. And later in the race, Ryan Preece caught Kyle Larson, raced him to the inside, smacked him on the side, and then basically they were just beating and banging through between turns 4 and turn 1 on that front straightaway before Kyle Larson's day was ultimately ended on the outside wall. Now, of course, I didn't have this in the notes, but Denny Hamlin was just penalized for race manipulation, and, of course, his penalty upheld. So it's clear that NASCAR wants to set a precedent of we are not going to let you behave this way. Man, and this puts him in a tough spot because, honestly, and here's why. Because Ryan Preece and, of course, I believe it was his crew chief or his spotter, they were having a big argument on the radio or a big debate on the radio and saying they wanted to get him back, and then someone said eye for an eye. Oh, man, not the best thing you can say. That's all I'm going to say on that. That is not the best thing you can say in this situation. And there's definitely going to be a review of the radio, I think. I think they're going to review the radio transmissions. I don't think he should be penalized because, you know, and I listen to Denny Hamlin's podcast, even though I don't like Denny Hamlin, but I do like his viewpoint here, and it's, you know, drivers should police themselves, or at least NASCAR wants to let them, and I think they should. I think, you know what, and I've also heard from Dale Jr. on his podcast that it's time, you know, if you want to bring the viewership back up, and NASCAR's viewership's been low, like down every race this year, I think you got to let these rivalries go. Let these drivers handle themselves. Look, let's have the rivalries, okay? Let's have the Preece versus Larson. Let's have the Ross versus Denny. Look, we need this in our sport. I would love to see a continuation of Daniel Suarez versus Alex Bowman. Now, look, let me clarify. I want to see hard racing when they race each other on the track. I don't want to see them deliberately wreck each other to a point where someone could get hurt. I don't want to see that. I just want to see good hard racing between two rivals. You know, no one's giving an inch. And maybe someone does wreck, but not like to a point, again, where someone gets hurt. Because, you know, it's all fun and games till somebody gets hurt. That's why I think they should let this Preece thing go. I doubt Larson's going to pay him back. And again, if you're keeping score, they're even. Ryan Preece and Kyle Larson are even. Kyle Larson started it. And again, Kyle Larson needs to learn to not. He needs to learn to listen when his spotter says car high. Because this is not the first time he's done this. Of course, Auto Club Chase Elliott, Watkins Glen Chase Elliott. Oh, man. You know, either you need a new spotter or you just need to, you know, clean your ears out here and learn to listen. I mean, eventually, you know, this is just the beginning, I hope, of people that are not going to take his crap just because he's a cup champion. And I wouldn't want them to, you know, and I don't want them to sit here and just take his crap because he's a cup champion. You know, he's a 20-something time winner in the NASCAR Cup Series. I don't want that. I want you to cut him no slack, okay? Treat him like nobody else, or treat him like everybody else. Same with Chase Elliott, same with Ross Chastain, you know, and I'm saying this as fans of both of them. Look, I just don't want them to be treated different. I think that's the bottom line. So that's the biggest story, I think, from Bristol. We got to go on to the news, though. And this, of course, the biggest story, I think, entering this week. And I'm shocked it's coming from a team like Rick Ware Racing. But, of course, as you guys know, Cody Ware sat out the NASCAR Cup Series race on Sunday due to a personal matter that he had to attend to. Which, of course, he was replaced by Truck Series driver Matt Crafton. And I didn't notice this because, you know, the cameras are never on Rick Ware Racing. But Matt Crafton's name was on the car. And normally when a driver's out, whether it's a personal matter or, you know, injury or whatever, much like in Chase Elliott's case, because his name is still on the 9 car, usually they leave the driver's name on if it's something, you know, like that. This was not the case. Matt Crafton's name was on the 51. And I think, you know, I wish I had seen this Sunday. Because that would have led me to believe a lot more than what I thought it was. I thought maybe it was a medical issue for Cody Ware. The news came out Monday afternoon that Cody Ware was arrested. Cody Ware was arrested and arraigned for strangling a woman and suspended indefinitely by NASCAR as of that, like within hours of that happening, it was announced he was also suspended by NASCAR. And for those who don't know, this isn't the first incident with one of the members of the Ware family. Of course, Carson Ware, his younger brother, also was arrested burglarizing a place, and I believe he also was tried for hitting a woman. And I probably shouldn't say this, but you're a pussy if you hit a woman. As a man, you're a pussy. Plain and simple. I'm sorry. Like, I gotta say it. You're just not a good person. You know, it's... But there's no other way to put it. I just hope that they don't let Cody Ware back in that 51 if he's guilty. Of course, keep in mind, innocent before proven guilty, and, you know, but he's going to have no fans if he comes back. I could promise you that. He's going to have no fans, and I know this is Rick Ware's team. I know this is his dad's team. I don't see a chance of him coming back. Especially if Haven says, I'm not sponsoring a guy who hit a woman. So this might be the end of Cody Ware's career. You know, I've been checking my phone throughout the afternoon because I wanted to see if there was an update on anyone potentially driving the 51, and from Rick Ware Racing and from Bob Pockrass's end, there's been nothing. So, of course, that leads me to question who is going to replace him after Bristol. I'd have to imagine seeing the SHR, you know, alliance that they have. I'd imagine they're going to go with Cole Custer, because he's got Cup experience. And, of course, again, the SHR Alliance. So I imagine Cole Custer will be in the car at Martinsville. And, again, there could be an announcement as this is premiering or shortly before this is premiering. But I would have to believe Cole Custer, maybe Garrett Smithley in the 51. And then, you know, maybe Riley Herbst shares the car. But I imagine it'll be a combo of those three, and if we get to the road courses, I hope they put Joey Hand back in the car. Joey Hand should have been in the car at COTA, and I'm sorry, you know, I like Jensen, Jensen deserved to be in a car, but man, at the cost of Cody Hand, or I'm sorry, at the cost of Joey Hand, I just don't think it was a good option. I think Joey Hand really made Rick Ware Racing look good last year. He made him look really good, and they should have given him another shot on the road courses this year. I think he could have pulled off some top 10s, some top 5s in those Rick Ware cars. So, of course, there's been a lot made of driver, super subs. Josh Berry's been phenomenal behind the wheel of the number 9. He hasn't, he's been inconsistent, but his Richmond run to second, I think, has really, spurred the conversation. Maybe one that's not being discussed openly, but I want to have this open dialogue. So what I have done is I have made kind of the top 3 prospects for each manufacturer at the moment. So I've split it up by manufacturer, Ford, Chevy, Toyota, and I'm going to give you the top 3 that I think are the best in each camp. Now, here are the rules, though, and I said prospects. Okay, so the rules are John Hunter Nemechek, Justin Allgaier, Cole Custer, Daniel Hemrick, and Ryan Truex do not count, as all have run at least one full season in the NASCAR Cup Series. And then the other rule is that even though they drive for a manufacturer, they might not be under contract with the manufacturer, but because they race for the manufacturer, that's why they're being put in that group. So, again, the reason I'm doing this is because we've seen a lot of, or a few substitutions already this season. And, of course, we're going to be entering silly season in a couple months where we're going to... right now it's vivid. We really don't know. There's still a honeymoon phase with a bunch of teams and new drivers and stuff. And, we know... with Stewart-Haas Racing, they may have 2 rides that are vacant, but they're not focused on that right now, or at least there's been no big story about who's going to replace who. So I think I want to give my not-so-early look into that as well. I'm not going to pick where they're going to go, but I'm saying these are, I think, the prospects from each manufacturer that everybody's going to have an eye on. Another thing is, just because they're on the screen does not mean that I think that they are going to Cup next year. It does not mean that I think they are Cup ready. It is basically in order of most Cup ready to least Cup ready. But of course, I'm going to go backward 3-1. Anyway, without further delay, I'm going to get into it. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. It's going to look weird for a second, guys, so forgive me. But here we go. So I got my top prospects. I'm going to start with the Toyota camp. The Toyota camp was really hard to predict because Toyota, they're small but mighty, and really they're thin compared to Chevy. I think Chevy was the easiest, but it was also the hardest because there's so much talent on both sides. So I begin with Toyota, though. And number 3, I had to put Kaz Grala. It was really just a tough choice. And again, it's because I couldn't pick John Hunter Nemechek. If John Hunter Nemechek was able to be picked, he would have been number 1, clearly, because of the Cup experience. So Kaz Grala, and again, you may be saying to yourself, well, he's run Cup races before. I'm saying they can't run a full season. Or they haven't run a full season. Kaz Grala's run, I believe, 4 or 5 races in his career. So that is why he's on this list. We know he's capable of driving a Cup car. I believe because of the limited exposure, that's why he's the number 3 over the other Toyota prospects. The other options were literally Tanner and Taylor Gray, and then Joe Graff Jr. And Joe Graff Jr. is splitting time between... He's basically doing a tour around the garage this year trying to fill out a full schedule. So I can't count him. And then Ryan Truex, I think just his career is where it is right now, unfortunately. Number 2, I had to put Corey Heim. Truck Series star. He's, honestly, I mean, it's a new team. It's a new manufacturer for Tricon Garage, so I can't fault them too much for him not having as much success to start the year. I do want to say that I can't fault him for that. What I can say about him is, I think, honestly, and I'll make this bold prediction, I think he would have competed with Zane Smith last year if he ran the full schedule in the 51. He was probably the strongest guy in the 51 that was not named Kyle Busch in recent years. So that says a lot. I think this kid should be running some NASCAR Xfinity races as well. But, we'll see. There's still time to figure that out for the number 19. The number 1, I think it's very obvious, Sammy Smith right now. I mean, he's having to race against some tough Chevy guys, but he's definitely, I think, the number 1 prospect for Toyota in this aspect. And, of course, we know Denny Hamlin. We know he's in a contract year. I imagine he'll be back. I don't see why he wouldn't. And then, of course, you got to factor in Martin Truex Jr. We don't know what his future holds. So I believe John Hunter will obviously get a ride in the Cup Series if that happens. But, again, I worry about John Hunter with Toyota because they tend to do a lot of one-and-dones with the older drivers to, let's say give Sammy Smith another year in Xfinity and then move him up to Cup. That's what I worry about with John Hunter Nemechek. Now, if both rides empty out, I'm going to worry about Corey Heim coming up. I just don't know about John Hunter getting a real shot at Toyota, but I think Sammy Smith, number 1, is the clear option. So now we go on to Ford, and I'm telling you, I mean, I thought Toyota was hard. Ford was the most difficult one because they are literally like Toyota in the Cup Series, just thin across the board. But I had to put Riley Herbst number 3. Oh, that was a toss-up. Because I really don't think, I'm telling you, and I just don't think Riley Herbst is going to make it at the Cup level. I have friends that think he's going to. I don't see it. I'm sorry, I think he's going to be a bust. Just my opinion. But again, I had no other choice. Number 2, I put Ben Rhodes. He did run a Cup race. I don't think he did too hot, but, or at least he ran a couple, practices in the Cup car for Colleague. I'll have to double check that. I believe he ran either a practice or a race for them at Colleague Racing, but Ben Rhodes, I don't think he's the one under contract with Ford, but again, I think, him being a Truck Series champion, I think that puts him, kind of above the rest, although I think, honestly, at this point, I just don't see him moving up beyond trucks. It's unfortunate, really. Number 1 is a no-brainer. It's Sammy Smith, man. I mean, he's going to be full-time in the Cup Series in 2024. There's just no avoiding it. I mean, whether it's with Front Row or it's with even Stuart Haas. We know Stuart Haas is going to have 1, maybe 2 vacancies. He'll be highly recruited, and if he's not brought in full-time with the Cup Series Ford team, he will for sure be recruited, Like I said, if he's not brought in for a Cup Series Ford team, he'll be brought in by another team. I can promise you that. And Ben Rhodes did run 1 Cup race. He ran it with Spire Motorsports in 2021. Just thought I'd verify that. Now we're on to the bow ties. This one, once we got past 1 and 2, it was a little more difficult. And to be honest, I don't think 3 to 1, 1 to 3. I think it doesn't matter because these guys are clear cut, top 3. But I had to go Josh Berry number 3. Mostly just because of the Xfinity Series points right now. I mean, I think he's going to be in the championship hunt, but I think, he's going to be the one getting a cup ride next year. I don't think there's just any way to avoid it at this point. He's been phenomenal behind the wheel of the number 9. He's shown impressive speed, and he'll definitely get a chance. Number 2, I had Chandler Smith. The man's winning races right now. He very well should be a 2-time winner this season. I think he's going to be a Championship 4 hopeful at this point. And I wasn't too high on him at the start of the year. I thought he'd have an okay year, kind of, ride the wave, he'll make the playoffs, kind of be mid in terms of, the top Xfinity guys. And then next year I thought he'd take off. But I think this year he's bound to take off. And he's going to put the pressure on Colleague and other Cup teams to look at him, especially running a Cup part-time schedule for Colleague. Number 1, again, I couldn't pick Daniel Hemrick, so number 1 was Austin Hill. I imagine if Childress can get his hands on a third charter, he's going to bring this guy up. Someone's going to call him up next year, or he'll stay with Beard, but I think he's the clear-cut number 1 in terms of Chevy prospects. So that's kind of my prospect ranking. Let's get on to the rest of the news. We're running short on time. Of course, the All-Star race format has been revealed. 100 laps for the All-Star Open, a break at lap 40, and much like the old days, the top 2 finishers will advance into the All-Star race. The All-Star race itself, 200 laps with a break around halfway, and all laps count, caution and green, and with overtime. We'll have 2 60-lap heats to determine the starting grid. The heat lineups will be determined by the fastest pit stops. And essentially the heats are literally like the Daytona duels, it sounds like. So I like the format. I think, I'm just looking forward to North Wilkesboro. And I've said before, I said this weekend to my friends, and I'll say it to you guys here. I hope to God they don't put PJ1 on that track. Keep PJ1 and resin as far away from that track as you possibly can. And not even going to elaborate on it. Just keep it as far away as possible. But anyway, let's get on to the picks. Let's start with the Truck Series at Martinsville. I'm picking Kyle Busch. He's in the truck field. You gotta pick Kyle Busch if he's in the truck field. There's just no way around it. Xfinity Series at Martinsville, I'm picking Josh Berry. I think this is his kind of track, and I think him getting some practice in the Cup car, he's going to find something along the way. I think he'll get the win on Saturday. Cup Series at Martinsville, I'm picking William Byron. I think he's going to pick up kind of where he left off before Coda, Bristol Dirt, and all that. So I think he'll get back on track relatively quick here. IndyCar Long Beach, I'm going to pick a surprise. So I think it's going to be easy to pick Pato O'Ward, but I think Arrow McLaren, they're starting to find their way with the 3 cars. And I want to say Pato O'Ward, but I think this is going to go to Alexander Rossi. I think Rossi will get his first win with Arrow McLaren Racing. And I think he'll ultimately get that fresh start with his new team that we know he was going to have. So I think we'll see Classic Rossi at Long Beach, and I can't wait to see what happens there. This should be a fun race, and like I said, I'm looking forward to it on Sunday. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Thank you all for watching. Tune in to No Final Bell tomorrow. We will be back with Sunday Morning Tinkle this Sunday. We just didn't do one because of Easter. But we will be back this Sunday. Otherwise, we will see you back here on next Tuesday, for another episode of Out of Turn 4. Until then, guys, goodbye, everyone.